I still remember that Memorial Day morning as if it's etched into my bones. The air was warm but had that crispness you only get in Virginia when the sun is still low, and the crowds were already gathering at Arlington National Cemetery. People from every corner of the country were there, families holding tiny flags, veterans in their caps covered in pins, tourists with cameras pressed tight to their chests, all waiting to see the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. It's one of those ceremonies that feels frozen in time, every step, every movement, drilled to perfection. And if you've ever stood there in silence as the guard's shoes click against the marble, you know it has a way of sinking into you, of reminding you that respect sometimes speaks loudest in quiet. That day, one of the guards on duty was Sergeant Ethan Hayes, 28, built like a wall of stone, face unreadable, posture so rigid it almost didn't look human anymore. But under all that formality, Ethan carried his own private weight. He'd lost his younger brother in Iraq a few years earlier. He didn't talk about it often, but the truth was that every shift, every salute, every minute he stood guarding that tomb wasn't just for nameless heroes. It was for his brother, too. And maybe that's why what happened that morning hit him harder than anyone expected. Not far from where I stood was a little girl in a wheelchair. Couldn't have been more than 10. Her name was Emma. She wore this pale blue dress with sunflowers. On it, a small flag tucked in her lap, and her eyes, big, round, sparkling, were locked on the walkway where the guards would soon pass. Her mom, Mary, leaned down often to whisper something in her ear, and each time Emma's face lit up. Later, I learned that Emma's dad had been a Marine who never made it home from Afghanistan. He'd always told her about the guards, about how precise and unwavering they were, and she had dreamed for years of seeing it herself. The thing is, crowds can be cruel without even realizing it. People jostled for better views, held their phones. Up high, kids climbed on their parents' shoulders, and little by little Emma and her wheelchair got swallowed in a forest of legs and elbows. At first her mom tried to politely ask folks if they could just make a small opening so her daughter could see, but you know how it goes. Most people were too wrapped up in getting their own perfect shot to care, and then there was this one man. Middle-aged, sharp suit like he'd just come from a board meeting, Bluetooth headset jammed in his ear even though he was clearly on vacation. His name was Jack Heron. You could tell the type right away, the kind of guy who thinks rules are for everyone else. He planted himself right in front of Emma, blocking her entire view, scrolling on his phone and half-heartedly watching the ceremony like it was background noise. Mary tapped his elbow, asked gently if he could step a little aside so her daughter could see, and he didn't even look up, just muttered something about being here first. When she pressed again, he actually smirked, said, "Lady, life isn't fair. Maybe buy better seats next time," as if this was a football game and not a place where silence is sacred. And when Emma tried to peek around, he shifted deliberately, like he was enjoying being an obstacle. At one point, when the crowd surged and her wheelchair nudged his shoe, he snapped, "Watch it, you're scratching my loafers," and gave the wheel a little shove with his foot. The gasp that rippled through the people nearby told me I wasn't the only one who saw it. Emma's eyes welled up, her hands tightened on that tiny flag, and for a moment, the whole sanctity of the morning felt poisoned by this man's arrogance. Now here's the part no one could have expected. Ethan, standing guard, saw it all. You've got to understand these soldiers are trained to be statues, to let nothing break their concentration, not weather, not hecklers, not even their own emotions. But Ethan's jaw tightened, his grip on the rifle shifted, and though his eyes stayed fixed straight ahead, you could feel that his focus wasn't just on the tomb anymore. The ceremony went on, the precise march, the echoing clicks of boots, the turning on the heel. But then Jack, that businessman, leaned over toward another tourist and scoffed just loud enough to be heard. "These guys aren't soldiers, they're just props, standing here like mannequins. What a waste." It was the kind of comment that Might have been ignored anywhere else, but in that place with that little girl straining to see past his shoulder, it was like a match dropped in gasoline. Something in Ethan snapped. He broke formation. And let me tell you, if you've ever been to Arlington, you know, that just doesn't happen. The crowd collectively held its breath as Ethan pivoted, boots hitting marble with a thunder that seemed louder than it should have been. He marched straight toward the barrier, straight toward Jack, eyes blazing, and when he stopped, the silence was so thick you could hear birds in the trees. "Sir," he said, voice carrying across the plaza, "step back." It wasn't a shout, but it was sharper than any bark of command I'd ever heard, like steel cutting through air. Jack froze, phone halfway raised, mouth open. People turned to look, cameras lowered, and all at once that smug veneer on Jack's face cracked. He stammered, I was just... But Ethan didn't give him the chance. He gestured firmly with one white-gloved hand, and the crowd instinctively parted, clearing a path. Then Ethan did something even more shocking. He lowered himself down, one knee on the marble, rifle balanced with such care, until he was eye level with Emma. He looked right into her tear-filled eyes and said softly, "Miss, you have the best seat in the house now." The little flag trembled in her hand, and for the first time that morning, she smiled, wide, genuine, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Mary covered her mouth, tears streaming, whispering thank you over and over. The crowd, usually, bound by silence, couldn't help it. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling like a wave. Even veterans who normally scold at the smallest breach of decorum nodded approvingly. Ethan gently placed his hand on the wheelchair handle and rolled Emma forward to the front, right where no one could block her view. Jack, red-faced, muttered something about overreacting and tried to slip away, but he didn't get far. A cemetery staff member in uniform intercepted him, expression stern, and escorted him off the grounds. The crowd didn't even look back. His presence had already been erased, overshadowed by what just happened. As the ceremony resumed, Ethan rose, adjusted his hat with precision, and returned to his post. But you could see it in his eyes that he wasn't just a guard anymore. He was a human being who had chosen compassion over protocol. And funny enough, when his commanding officer approached afterward, no reprimand came. Instead, the officer placed a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "Sometimes, Sergeant, honoring the fallen means honoring the living too." The story didn't stay confined to that plaza. A teenager who'd been filming caught the whole thing on video, and within hours it was everywhere online. The clip of a soldier breaking formation to kneel before a little girl in a wheelchair became a symbol, shared across social media, debated on news shows, replayed at dinner tables. Some people argued Ethan had broken sacred protocol, that discipline must come first no matter what. Others said what he did was the truest form of honor, showing that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. And Emma, well, her mom later posted a photo of her clutching that tiny flag, beaming with the caption, "She finally saw her hero, not just the one she lost, but the one who stood for him that day." As for Ethan, he went back to his duties, silent and stoic as ever, but those who knew him said there was a new softness in the way he carried himself, like he'd proven to himself, that even within the strictest of rituals, humanity still had a place. Now, every time I think of that day, I wonder, was it a breach of protocol, or was it exactly what the moment demanded? Did Ethan risk dishonor? Or did he elevate the meaning of that ceremony by reminding us that at the heart of all those rules are people, fragile and grieving, just trying to find a sliver of connection? What do you think? Was Sergeant Hayes wrong to break formation? Or was it an act of courage that honored not just the unknown soldier, but every child, every family who carries the weight of sacrifice? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Tell me which side you're on. Share this story with someone who believes in compassion over rigidity. because sometimes the hardest rules to break are the ones we build around our own hearts. And maybe, just maybe, breaking them is the only way to let the light in.